This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay. Baruchim Haba, welcome everyone to today's Pirkei Avos shir, Perek Gimel Mishnah Ches. Today's shir is sponsored by a good friend, Rabbi Rose of Los Angeles, Leila Nishmas Tzvi Ben Levi Yitzchak, Nishama Shaban Aliyah, and shirim today are sponsored by Rabbi Joe Farbus, Leila Nishmas, his grandfather. And I want to invite everyone, Be'ez Hashem, Sunday night is the other occasion which is enacted as the yahrzeit of the great Tana Reb Meir. We're having a special event at 9 p.m. at 638 Oakland Avenue. We're going to have Divrei Torah on the great Tana Reb Meir, and we're releasing a new nigun, Rabbi Moshe Morgenstern, on the piyut of the Baba Sali. This piyut is not in the back of the Sefer. The back of the Sefer we have the piyut of the Baba Sali's father, Rav Masud Abi Chatzera. And if you want to get your Reb Meir Sefer before the yahrzeit, you could get it at your local Sfarim store, or you could order it from rabbidg.com with free delivery. Okay, Pirkei Avos, Perek Gimel Mishnah Ches. And lo and behold, we have a Mishnah, and you know who the Tana of this Mishnah is? Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Dustoi, Rabbi Yanai, Mishum Rabbi Meir Omer. Rabbi Dustai, in the name of Rabbi Yanai, said from Rabbi Meir, Kol ha-shoicheach davar echad mi-mishnasai. L'char, that means Rabbi Dustai, the son of Rabbi Yanai, said in the name of Rabbi Meir, anyone who forgets something, even one thing from his learning, Mala olav akasav, it is considered ki'lu meschayiv benafshai, as if you're liable for your own life. So there's a very harsh criticism. The Mishnah says, if somebody forgets one thing they learned, it's considered like they're liable for their life. Shenemar rak hishamar lecha. Only be careful. Or shmar nafshecha ma'od, and guard your soul very much. Pen tishkach es hadvar masher ro'ei einecha, lest you forget the matters that your eyes saw. So that's a very harsh critique. Anyone who forgets even one thing from their learning is considered like they're liable for their life. Tell me somebody who remembers even one thing they ever learned. Most people forget not some things they learned. Most people forget almost everything they learned. And here Reb Meir is saying, if you forget even one thing that you learned, you're meschayiv benafshay. Shenemar rak hishamar lecha u'shmar nafshecha ma'od pen tishkach es hadvarim. And then the Mishnah says, Yachal afilu sakva alav mishnasai. I would think even if your learning was so difficult and you couldn't hold on to it, you're still chayiv misa. Talmud loymar ufen yasuru milavavcha kol yimei chayecha. Therefore it says, unless you remove it from your heart all the days of your life, that you're not chayiv benafshay until you literally remove it from your heart. So I want to share with you the approach, as we did last week, from the Sfarim of Rabbi Eliyahu Hakohen of Izmir, a number of ideas that are brought out in the Sfarim of Rabbi Eliyahu Hakohen of Izmir. This week we're going to do some new Sfarim of his, the Mizbeach Eliyahu, and he analyzes this Mishnah in the following way. In his Sefer on Mizbeach Eliyahu Parshas Emor, he brings this Mishnah that Kol ha-shoicheach davar echad mi-mishnasai harei zeh meschayiv benafshay, and he says yikshe tuva. You could ask very much. Harei amru Chazal. Chazal say shemei Hashem hoysazos sheyimatzei shikcha ba'adam. The fact that there's a phenomenon of forgetting is it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? Kedei shetamid yachsal tamudai. God made us forget because He wants us always to review. Shem lo haya adam shecheach, because a person wouldn't forget haya loy made. He would learn v'omer. Okay, kfar lamadati kol ha-Torah. I already learned the whole Torah. Now what? Let's say a guy, he's a daf yomi yid. So after 7 years, he could go golfing for the rest of his life because he already learned it and he remembered. Okay, he didn't do Yushami. Okay, he'll spend another couple years and that's it. So God made us forget because He wants us always to learn. So what do you mean? Oh, anyone who forgets one thing, he's chayiv me. So what do you mean? That's not our fault. I would love to remember. God made me forget. Umali lilmaydod. We're afraid a person will say, why should I learn further? Amnam kivan shashikam matsuyo zehu gam shemay tamid. Because forgetfulness is common and likely, therefore we always learn. V'imkein eich mechayv hatana l'shita l'shakech davar echem mishnasai. How could the Tana say you're chayiv for forgetting one thing? And if you're going to say, nah, you're not actually chayiv for shikcha, kiyamalu mesira melibay, that's only if you remove it from your heart. Einoi muvan kain, meirayas ha-pasuk. That's not understood from the pasuk. The pasuk says, pentishkach es hadvar mashoenecha. Lest you forget the mashma shemechayiv ala shikcha. The pasuk seems to be saying you're chayiv for forgetfulness. Shem shachach chayiv hadju koshel duchta. Why are you chayiv for forgetting? Who made us forget? God made us forget. In other words, I would love to remember the Gemara and Brachas that I learned today. The only thing is tomorrow I'm going to forget it, because that's human nature. Says Rabbi Eliyahu Hakohen of Izmir, this Mishnah does not mean what you think it means. It means something else entirely. Amnam nira lefarish ein divrei atana tfeilim noiflim ala loimed v'sharkeach. This Tana is not talking about someone who learns and forgets. Sharikach gazar kodesh baruch hu, that's what God decreed. V'yachol lachzar oisai sefer shon v'yizkar. You could review and then you might still forget and maybe you'll remember, but it's not our fault. You know what the Tana is saying you better remember? Achachiyov noifel al hashoicheach davar echad mi mishnasai. Someone who forgets something from his own chidushim. Daika. Sheshecheach davar shechidesh b'Torah miseches shenisatzav loy kosav al inyan al sefer b'dyoi. Someone learned a pasuk, a Ramban, a Perush, a Tosfos, and he had a chidush, but he forgot the chidush. You know why? Because he's lazy and he didn't write it down. Says that, great. Baruch Hashem, this Mishnah doesn't apply to me because I don't have any chidushim. I just listen to other people. So I don't have to worry about this Mishnah. No, we're going to see chidush means something you didn't know. So you learned something you didn't know, but you forgot it. You know why you forgot it? Because you were lazy, you didn't write it down. So why should I write it down? Because when somebody tells you, okay, here's the account number, call in the number, and you'll redeem it for $1,000, you say, wait a second, let me get a pen. So important things you write down. So why don't you write down things you learned the same way you write down information that you need to remember? Kishem she'ena mesatza lichtav cheshbonoso b'inyan hamamon kedei shelo ya'aved davar ma shem yishkach yimtzeu kasav b'sefer. In other words, if you lend somebody $1,000, you'll probably write it down. Al zeh noifel hachiyuv. Regarding your learning, there's a chiyuv. V'zeh kol shecher davar echad mi mishnasai mima sheshoina v'chidush mishum shem yishkach. If you forget it, there's a big problem. You see, if you forget the Gemara and Brachas, guess what? Life goes on. Because you might not remember, but there's still a Talmud Bavli written down. There is even an art scroll Gemara, and if you don't remember, someone else will remember. But if you don't remember your chidush that you came up with, if you're not going to remember it, then it's going to be gone forever. Kiven shu davar shaloi mi yiskaloi. If it's yours, who's going to remind you? So kol hashoicheach davar echad mi mishnasai, something you thought of, something you came up with. If you don't write it down, that's the problem. And listen to this, umevi raya brura, that brings a clear proof that since, what does it say? Pentishkach es advar masharo einecha. Maybe you're going to forget the matters that your eyes saw. Daika v'lo einei chavercha. Something you saw, someone else didn't see it. Shehu mashachidashta milibcha. This is something you created. Shazel lo yira ki im einei sichelcha. You're the only one who saw this. Medaber ala loimed b'sefer. If it's just talking about somebody who learns out of a book, v'shacheach, and he forgets, that's not ro einecha. Your friend also saw that. Gam eine chaver ra isay v'zehu amroi. This is what it means. Ha'enoi meschai benavshay ad sheyasha v'yisir miliboy. Miliboy, it's something that you remove dafka from your heart. Mar Rabbi says Rabbi Eliyahu Hakohen Izmir. Ashrei mi shabalakan. Fortunate is someone who goes upstairs. V'talmudai biyadai, and his learning, Talmudai, his contribution is in his hand, was written. Shemeviyai biyadai kolaymer shekasav chidushav. So now your Talmudai is biyadai. This is what the Mishnah means. Be careful in an old man who forgot his learning. Right? He's zoher bezaken sheshachach Talmudai, because that's it's takfai olav mishnasai. It was something he couldn't hold on to. So this is the idea. The idea of Rabbi Eliyahu Hakohen Izmir is that the Mishnah is not so much talking about somebody who forgets something they learned. He forgot a pasuk, he forgot a gemara. That's a halbatzara. The gansatzara is if you have a contribution, and we'll see what the definition of chidushay Torah is. But if you thought of a good question, or you thought of a good teretz, or you thought of a good pshat, you better write that down right away. Because if you don't remember it, that might be lost from the world forever. The Rabbi Eliyahu Hakohen of Izmir, in his Sefer Sheva and Musar, he writes, a person should be careful to try to innovate new Torah thoughts, to achieve more than his ability. So you say, nah, that's beyond me, I can't do it, it's above my capability. That's right, it is above our capability, because we're only a basar v'dam. But, you should pray to the one who chachma belongs to. The same way a person has a mitzvah to procreate, to have children, you have an obligation to procreate in Torah. Create new ideas. Shenemar yishrutzu hamayim. Let the water swarm. V'yein mayim el Torah. V'yizoyer lechadesh chidushim liyoisam chokok al liboy. You should innovate ideas. They should be inscribed on your heart. V'hu atara l'roisha. That will be your crown. Kishalach la'olamai. Says the Sheva and Musar, it will be embarrassing when they ask the soul, "Nu, what were you mechadesh?" And you say, I don't know. I came up with a new color of paint in my den. I spent many days poring over paint samples. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what did you innovate in Torah? And then the Sheva Musar brings a very powerful story. He says on the Tzaddik Rav Shmuel Kadenover, I believe that is the Kav HaYashar, that he had a Seder reviewing his own Chidushim. Shamatzu oisai choizer chidushav be'ez kavua. He had a set Seder reviewing his own Chidushim. Now when I saw this yesterday, I was reminded of something I read about the Chassam Sofer that I have to say I didn't really understand, and in this context I think we understand very well. In the Sefer Minhagei Chassam Sofer, I have it right here. This Minhagei Chassam Sofer, it's not a rare Sefer, it's available, but this one is very dear to me. I have it from my grandfather. I'm not sure if he brought it over from Europe. He may have. Many of his svarim are brought up from Europe. For example, this Sefer, it's called the Sefer Charedim, Rabbi Eliyahu Azkiri, and it has the stamp of one of the DP camps in it. So this is from the DP camps. And I have a collection of letters from the Ger Rebbes that my grandfather brought over from Munich and other DP camps. But this Sefer, I'm not sure where it's from. It's a collection of different customs of the Chassam Sofer. He says that when the Chassam Sofer gave shir any svara he said on his own, any answer he said, any chidush that he asserted, the Talmidim had to then review right after the shir. Miyad chazara tamid al dvarav ben kolam. And during the chazara, he was mafalpel with them. And they would be mafalpel with him during the drasha, whether it's ba'agadata, whether it's b'shmaitza. Anything the Chassam Sofer said, they had to review. And he says, Ashrei ayin ra'asa ahavas haTorah. So fortunate is the eye that saw this love of the Torah. But it says, Ma'oid haya makbid achazaras halimud tamad. Chassam Sofer was very makbid on review his learning always. V'gamhu ba'atzmoi chazar al kol shir shalomad and talmidav dalid pa'amim b'chol yoim. Any shir Chassam Sofer gave, he reviewed that shir 4 times every day. I always wondered, why was Chassam Sofer so busy reviewing the shiurim that he gave? The answer is, it seems like, aside from the obligation not to forget Torah, there's a special obligation not to forget the Torah that's your contribution. And here he says the chidushim that the Chassam Sofer was mechadesh every week. He would write in a special notebook. And on Wednesday, he did not give an Ian shir. And there's nothing the Chassam Sofer ever said that was not written down. And this, the Sheva Musar says, is the meaning of Ashrei mi shabalakan v'talmudai biyadai. And I know what you're thinking. You're saying, this is not relevant to everybody. Many people, halavai, they should be koivea itim la and review their learning. But not everybody is capable of being mechadesh chidushim. But we're going to address that as well. But I want to show you an interesting paragraph in the Shevet Musar of Rabbi Eliyahu Hakohen of Izmir. And in this paragraph, he gives us examples of what we could learn from everything in nature. Whatever you see in this world, you could learn from. Whether it's a blade of grass, whether it's a cow, whether it's a cat, whether it's a bird, whether it's a cactus. Everything in this world you could learn from. So he gives examples. He says, "Gam al yekal be'enei ha'adam eza dibur sheyach lilmoid or eza chidash shechidesh b'Torah." It should not be low in your eyes. Something that you learn, or a chidash that you innovated, even if it's small, it should not be small in your eyes. You should elevate it, magnify it, make it great, because this will bring you to be mechadesh more chidushim. Until you're accustomed to being mechadesh great chidushim, and you plant in all the world's beautiful plantings from your chidushay Torah to make gardens and orchards. What do we learn from here? Yilmad min hazareya zera katan kachada. Let's learn a lesson from someone who plants a small seed like mustard. Zoyra ma'isa, you plant a small mustard seed, v'nasa ilan gadol. Let's like this. Somebody plants an oak tree. In 10 years, in 20 years, it could be 100 feet tall. Hasharoshim, anofim, va'olam aperos, roots, branches, leaves, fruits. And you could plant from the branches, plantings, until it becomes gardens and orchards. Where did it all come from? The fact that the person had the good sense not to throw the little tiny seed in the garbage. There's a little tiny seed, and from that little tiny seed, came from it a tremendous tree. But Elanis Gadel Be'inav, it was elevated in his eyes. It was Rayu Shmara Shagar Mechaza. The guy had the good sense to care and to protect this seed. So even if you have a small chiddush in Torah, it's like a seed. Preserve it, record it, write it. He says, Umatoiv umanom, how proper it is. Any novelty that you have in Torah, afilu chidush katan, even a small chidush, lahaloisai karega ala sefer b'diyai. As soon as you have it, you should write it down. Laman yamod yomim rabim, so it should have long shelf life. Shelo yishkacheyu. Like I saw in the Hakdam of the Sefer Chasidim, that someone who doesn't write down his chidushim because it's small in his eyes is asad litein asadin. Because we tell the guy, I don't understand, you have a whole notebook, you have a whole record book of all the imports and exports and all the expenses and all the credits and all the debits and what you owe and what other people owe you, and you have over there, this guy owes me a nickel and that guy owes me 2 cents and I owe him 3 pennies. And that's important in your eyes. What about a Chiddush in Torah? It says, V'chiyoyser. V'chiyoyser. Let me just move this aside. V'chiyoyser chaviv hay b'nech chatzi b'shul g'zad shel shkach l'abdu mechidush shel Torah afilu she'yeh katan. Is a half a penny more valuable than a Chiddush in Torah? Therefore, anything that a person innovates in Torah, anything a person mechaber Torah, he should write down. This is again what it means. Asher mi shabalakan v'talmuda b'yadai. Talmuda, your contribution. How do you have your talmuda b'yadai? Shekesavai, because by doing so you won't forget it. Now this is also what the Tana means, and again, this is what he said in the Mizbeach Eliyahu, someone who forgets something, mi mishnasai, is kilu mischayev benafshai. So what does it mean, mishnasai? How do you make sure you don't forget it? What do you mean? So anyone who forgets something from his learning is mischayev benafshai. What are you supposed to do? The answer is, what are you supposed to do? You write it down. Because anytime you forget it, you'll see it and you'll remember. V'yesh toyeles gadol mechidash afilu katan. So you say, what do I need chidushim for? Talmud Bavli is big enough. What do I need my chidush for? The answer is a chidush has great toyeles. Lekasher imay eza inyan. It ties you to that subject. I love I lahavin imay inyan gadol. It helps you understand better. You know what it's like? It's like you have a big wall, and the wall is made out of big stones. But the wall is very wobbly and unstable because you need the little tiny stones to hold the bigger stones in place. You put little stones in a binyan avadim between stones to hold it up. So the avonim ketamnim are goyrem that the whole wall stand strong. Kacha idei chidush katan. Through a small chidush in learning, nivne binyan gadol. And this is ma'isa b'chol yom among the chachamim, especially among the darshanim, that through a chidush or a small new idea, from there they could sprout a whole beautiful building and a whole beautiful binyan. Nechmad lamaru masik lenefesh. Don't be mevaze writing down even the smallest idea. Even the smallest idea is b'chlal Torah. By the way, Rabbi Eliyahu Hakohen of Izmir writes in a Sefer Medrash Talpiyos that when the Beis Hamikdash stood, when a person brought a carbon, miskaperlai. Nowadays, if you write down in a notebook a new idea that you had, that it takes the place of a carbon. So you say this is a beautiful shir that has absolutely no relevance to me because I just learn what it says, and then when it's over, I eat lunch. So luckily, I don't have to worry about forgetting Chidushei Torah, because I listen to other people's Chidushei Torah. So now we come to a very important principle, and that is, what is the definition of Chidushei Torah? So the Stipler writes that in the Sefer Shiltus, which are Chidushim and ideas that the Berchas Roish was makabel from his Rebbi Reb Chaim Volozhiner. What is the definition of Chidushei Torah? Anytime you learn something and it becomes clearer and more crystallized, when you read it again, that's called Chidushei Torah. In other words, let's say you learned the Gemara 5 years ago, and now you learn it this time around and you understand it better. That added understanding is called Chidushei Torah. You're learning a Tosfos. At first you didn't understand it. Now you applied yourself a little bit more, now you understand it better. That's a Chidush in Torah. So you know what you should do? Write down on the side of your Gemara, Tosfos's question is X, Y, and Z. You don't have to write a whole Megillah. Or let's say you're learning a Gemara and you came up with a good pshat, or you saw a good pshat that you didn't know before. So let's say you saw a good Aruch LaNer. You write Ayin ba'Aruch LaNer, write 5 words. So you wrote Chidushei Torah. Wait, it's not my Chiddush, it's the Aruch LaNer's Chiddush. Yeah, but for you it's a Chiddush, because yesterday you didn't understand it, an hour ago you didn't understand, today you understood it. You go to a shir, you heard the guy spoke for 45 minutes, and you picked up 1 or 2 or 3, if you're lucky, 3 things. Halavai, you pick up 1 thing. So write down. I went to a shir, print out the Marmakomis, and write down one good thing you learned. You wrote down a chiddush in Torah. You were makriv a carbon to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then you put it away in a folder. By the way, the founder of the Young Israel program was Rabbi George Rushfield, who really started this chabura, and his family put out from him, and I think it's a very nice thing and something really that anybody could do. It's basically an English book of Divrei Torah on the Parsha. It's mostly from the Sefer Mayana Shel Torah with his ha'aras on it. But any Jew who learns Torah could write down one Dvar Torah on every Parsha and have a notebook of 50 Divrei Torah. It doesn't take a long time. You spend 10 minutes a week. You write down your favorite Knakadika Dvar Torah on the Parsha, and those are your chidushim. Everybody, Lefi Madregasei, when you write something down, it creates a very different attachment to it. It's the Maharsha says, Ashrei Misha Bolakan v'Talmuda biyadai. Fortunate is someone who comes to the next world that his learning was written, because when you write something, it engraves it on your heart. So it doesn't have to be a chiddush on the caliber of Rabbi Baruch Ber or Rabbi Chanan, but anything in learning that you didn't know. Or my biggest regret is always, I don't even remember many of the things I say. I'll tell you the honest truth. I thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu that some people listen. I have friends that tell me, last year you said, I said, thank you for telling me, now maybe I'll remember it. But, so everybody needs reminders, because the mind is very, very weak. And especially for Torah. Torah is Chachmas Elokis, and it does not naturally stay in the mind of Basar Adam. When somebody writes something down, it makes a much deeper impression. So, thank you everybody for joining today. I want to wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos, bracha v'hatzlacha, and you could join us Sunday morning for our Ian Shir on Masechta Yevamos at 10:35, or Sunday night streaming live the Rebbi Meir event 9 p.m. Please join us, and in the meantime, have yourselves a wonderful Shabbos. Shkayach, Kol Tov.
Says that writing down, you're publishing your chidushim is a segula. I don't know if it's for shidduchim or other success. But he's big on that.
Okay, but you got to write it. Okay, Kol Tov, everyone. Be well. Good Shabbos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.